Are we live? Okay. This is so bad. Okay. I'm just going to figure it out. I feel like this last 3 times I've told myself, hey, you're going to work on getting everything set up in the morning before you have to hop on at 11. And every time there's been something that either I barely make it in time after a networking event, or the tech was going all wrong last week because I wasn't even in my same house. I talked a little bit about that last week. I think that this is kind of very emblematic of what I'm trying to talk about this week about like the taking the imperfect action, because in a perfect world, like I'd have the different cameras. In fact, I'll just show you right now. I had my phone camera that I was going to try to use. You probably saw me swapping back and forth. Um, and I'd have like some maybe slides or things that I would pull up. I'd have like all of the different little pieces that I could put in as well. Um, why is this not full screen? I do not like that it's like a weird inset. I'm going to try to fix it in. There we go. Okay. Because that looks weird, right? Okay. Um, in fact, you're going to see me do stuff in while I'm here. Again, in a perfect world, have already adjusted this kind of stuff. But unfortunately, for those who didn't know, my kiddo was in the hospital last week and had to be on medications that he did not want to take. And it was a whole mess this whole week, honestly. Like half of this week has been a wash. Like I didn't get nearly as much done as I wanted to, which I know a few weeks back I'm like, here's how I can compensate for that. And I think there's an amount of like, you're never going to fully compensate for everything. So and I kind of know that. So it's like, how do you kind of get yourself back on track a little bit faster is sometimes the question, right? Which is, I think it could be its own live stream. Maybe I'll do that one next month in August. But taking imperfect action means a few things. Like there's actually really good podcast that I want to say is called that, but I've heard that before even that podcast came out. I've heard, I have um, oh, what is happening? Sorry, it's showing more than one person. Let me pull up the chat too to make sure I can see things that are happening. Yeah. No, that's not it. Okay. The thing about streaming is there's so many different, if anyone's ever done any streaming before, there's like a million different things trying to compete for your attention. But so imperfect action is just, you don't have to have everything figured out. I am one that is very much a person who does that, who's like, and I'll show you. So I just finished this notebook. Now this is like my 5th notebook that I finished. This is my 5th notebook that I finished since I started my business. And I'm the type of person where I have to have a plan, a strategy, choose a topic, like start writing out checklists of everything. Like that is often how I feel like I have to get started, have all of the different elements in place, and then I can like actually launch the course, start the new offer, do a new project. And even though strategy is my favorite thing to do with clients, there has to be this element of, okay, but action. Like, how are we going to put this into action? How are we going to go into action? And I talked a lot about that last last week. And I kind of want to get more into like the actual tangible ways to do that, because you absolutely, and I've talked to one of my fellow colleagues um, about like, hey, it's possible to overdo strategy. It's possible to go overboard, because you can sit in that planning strategy phase, because that's, especially for neurodivergent folks, that's kind of our happy place of like plans and notebooks and um, and doing all of that part. But when it comes time to actually do it, that's when we tend to falter. And that's why it's like you can go overboard with the strategy, and it's like starting to think through, like, this is like in a perfect world, this is what I would do, right? And like, here's all the different little bells and whistles I can add. Like, for example, I'm about to launch next month. In fact, I'm letting some folks in early, so feel free to DM me if you want to know more about my Story Spark Marketing Studio, which is going to be a community, and it's going to have lessons and courses and the community events that we're going to do together. And I have for years, for probably over for since October of 22, when I decided that was kind of how I wanted to do it. I have tried to get all of the I've tried to get the polished version out there, when I really needed to work on like what is the most minimum viable way I can do that. And that's definitely something that you hear a lot in like programming and development communities of minimal viable products if you're in entrepreneurship. Um, I don't know why the lighting is being weird. I don't know. I would have figured that out. I'm about to open a window or do a little bit of something. Okay. Come on. Anyway. See? Doing stuff on the fly. Okay, that's at least a little bit better. Although now I'm washed out. This is what happens when you don't have melanin. Okay. So, minimum viable products are pretty common. Like, I feel like a lot of people who are in startup and entrepreneurship spaces know that idea of like, how do I at least get it validated so that this is something that people want? Like, that is the goal with minimum viable products. And I have realized, and I was actually working on this for myself last night, that's also true in like the marketing and promotional space. In some ways, if you're marketing something pre-launch, or you're like trying to get a new offer out there, using marketing to kind of validate, if this is something people find engaging, that can be a way to kind of like pair that together. But even if you have an established offer that maybe you're thinking of doing something new, or you want to do maybe convert more to like an evergreen or repeatable marketing system, you need something, there's a lot of complexity in that. There's a lot of like tech, if if you want to do like a webinar, and you want to do a segmentation in your emails, and you want to have all of those different pieces, like I said, those are all the polish of the marketing. What is the most minimum viable way you can go about that? I was talking to one of my current clients right now about, she's guesting on podcasts, which is awesome. And, she's been told, hey, you should host a podcast. I've heard that before as well about myself. And it's like, yeah, but like a podcast is like a project without an end. There's no end date to that. So it's really hard to like sign yourself up for that. You're like, okay, well, I don't know if I can continue this in a year, 2 years, 3 years. And so like the minimum viable way is there like a limited interview series you could run? Is there some sort of self-contained way you can at least see if that's something that you could potentially add into your schedule? Is there a way you can do a newer project, or even, and see if that is something that will actually lead to some sort of results for you, or if it's something that you have the energy for. If you don't have the energy for it, you're like, oh wow, even just 10 episodes was like took way too much out of me, then that's not really for you. But it is an asset you can still continue to use later, so it's not completely wasted. Another aspect, I feel like the things that the minimum things you need in and I talked about this in one of my YouTube videos. Really, the minimum things you need new people to have a way for new people to find out about you. And that, like I said, going on podcasts is one. But even if you have something that's like discovery content that's on your website, like maybe you have it optimized for keywords. Um, maybe like LinkedIn, like you do a lot of posting on LinkedIn, and like if you engage on other people's profiles, that will start to show up in people who don't follow you. So there's techniques with even with LinkedIn that you can do that with. Maybe you use a lot of Pinterest. There's like, how do you get, again, minimum viable? It may just be, hey, I'm networking. Like that's how new people find out. It doesn't have to be like signing yourself up for another project. It could just be, hey, I'm already doing networking. Maybe it's making your referral system more robust. It doesn't have to be creating more marketing touch points and more, if that's not something that you feel like you need to do, or you need something that is more high touch, because typically high touch is just going to streamline that process a bit more, because they got to see your face, they got to hear you speak, things like that. So like new way for people, a way to learn more about what you do, like engage with you. This Again, this is what people think of when they think of marketing. Like I said, that podcast example is definitely an engagement piece. It's, people have to know about you to find your podcast more often than not. It's not as easily like searchable in the broad world as some other stuff would be. Again, social media. Um, if you have a brand community, like I have a Discord server, um, even some of the like articles that you may write. Um, if you do we'll talk about it a little bit more. I think like engagement and conversion can sometimes, I'm non-binary, so I feel like sometimes you're like, this could be one thing, and like an article, if it's comprehensive enough, and it, like I said, it's optimized, that's an engagement, but it also could work eventually, like in the long term, as a discovery or awareness, strategy as well. So, some things can do multiple things, usually after a long amount of time. Usually it doesn't, it's like one thing is like, okay, they had to find out about you, they already had to know about you to be on your email list, right? But maybe that email newsletter eventually becomes well known enough that people will discover it from that, like, or you like on Substack or something like that. But like engagement is just like, and really it could be stuff you're already doing. Again, if you're already engaging in other people's content, yeah, via like Substack or via LinkedIn, like that's engagement. Like if you're just being like, again, it can be as high touch as you want. Like again, just one-on-one with people. It could be something like videos on YouTube where it's a little bit more to the masses. It could be this live stream that I'm doing. Again, minimum viable to me was like, how do I just show up and talk through some of the things that I have learned through my own struggles and through my like in what I notice with my clients. And live stream, while I said there's some tech pieces with the live stream, I have not mastered them all, and I'm still showing up. This is the third time I've shown up. So like that consistency with engagement is definitely a big piece of it. But like in a minimum viable way, maybe you are doing like one big live stream that's like a whole workshop or webinar that people can engage with you, and so you build it up. So it's only one time. You're not committing yourself to a bunch of marketing activities, but you have committed yourself to like this one that you're going to test and see. Again, was it hard for me to figure out the tech? How did I feel during or afterwards? Like, what was the most successful way to get people to engage with that content? And then afterwards, like, let's say it is a longer webinar, maybe you do feel like, hey, I worked a lot with people, or I was able to kind of prime them. So I did let them know at the very, very end, hey, here's how to work with me. Did that work out well? Should I follow up with that? Like, did like maybe the event itself not necessarily have as much engagement, but afterwards when I shared the replays or I followed up with people after the fact, was that part successful? What aspects of that campaign, or like that, because I see it as like a minimum viable marketing campaign. It's something that is self-contained. Um, Not just the offer. Like I said, it could be an offer that you have validated, but now you're trying something new with, like, how can you judge like how sustainable that was and how repeatable it was for you? Because when you when you're doing the imperfect action, there's obviously things you would do better next time. But it's so much easier to do that with something that you've already kind of created versus creating something new every time. And that is that's the urge that I'm personally, trying to fight now, is like, that I've created enough behind the scenes that I'm like, I don't need to be creating new things all of the time. Like, how can I just lean more into what I've already done and bring it all the way to completion, at least enough to hit publish. I I'll talk about this a bit more on YouTube, but I challenged myself in July to press publish on a piece of content every single day for July, and I'll tell you, because things have been a little bit crazy, that did not happen as much as I'd like to. So I did not succeed in that way, but I published 15 new pieces of content, and I'll talk more about how that self-contained project was, in some ways, it put pressure on me, but not enough to like make me not want to do it, because I'm like, hey, July 31st, the experiment's over regardless, no matter what I was able to do. So being able to make it more self-contained and time sensitive, um, I feel like we touched upon that last week. That is, it's kind of weird. Like it's that like that urgency in yourself, because there is that time like I said that I would do, I said that I would launch the Story Spark Studio on like September 8th or whatever. Don't hold me to that date. That was just it's sort of going to be beginning September, so it's like, might be right and might be wrong, but it'll be in that neighborhood. But like you have, it's so easy to keep pushing and pushing and pushing things out. So when you tell other people and you publish about it and you start, doing that, you know, again, think of it as an experiment. This is imperfect. This is not going to be great, but what about it can you learn from? What about it maybe didn't work for you? You're going to have that data. Every decision that you make, every action that you take, there is really no succeeding and failing. I mean, again, there's launches that won't do great. There are times where, like, there were offers that fell flat for me, that no one really took a bite of, and I learned from that, and I'm like, how, what do I take from that and move forward with it? But I posted about this on my Instagram stories. I'll show you guys too. Hopefully, is this mirrored? So it's start finishing, how to go from idea to done. I just started. I'm like in chapter 4, so I'm not that far into it. But I had started noticing, hey, I start strong, but I don't always get all the way to the finish line. And so this is something that, like I said, I'm still refining for myself, but they're just minimum viable. Like, what is the simplest way to do it? What takes away all of the extra pieces that I'm telling myself that I need? For example, with the course, oh, I need to have video hosting. No, I don't. I have a YouTube channel. I listed those I put those videos on a playlist unlisted for people, and then I embedded it into the course, like it doesn't have to be all of these extra tools and steps. We're often making it a bit more difficult than it needs to be. If it's like, I've done webinars that were literally just Zoom calls that I just sent the Google Calendar link to people. Like, I'm like, here's the link. Again, knowing that there weren't going to be that many people, so I can do that for like 10 people. I can do that for that many. I wouldn't be able to if it starts scaling, but once it's scaled, it's validated, and now I can put forth the effort and the time and the resources towards making it better and towards perfecting and polishing, because it has been validated, because I know this is a topic, or this is a way that actually is effective for me. But yeah, I think that's where a lot of anxiety for the people that I work with have is, I don't know the right way to talk about what I'm doing. I don't know the words to say. And that's why in all of my content, I tend to start off with like that elevator pitch, like the polish your pitch. I've done that workshop for Global Entrepreneurship Week. I've done it in different places. And the elevator pitch to me is again, it's about that imperfect action, and it's helping get out of your head. And it's that instantaneous feedback loop. because like we all, if you're a creative or you're a business owner and you meet other people, in your industry or outside of your industry, ideal clients, having like pretty much everybody in those spaces need an elevator pitch. But what's great about an elevator pitch is, you know, if you didn't hit it exactly right, you can literally try again. Again, if let's say this is a networking event, you can literally try again in like 10 minutes with somebody else. Like there's no committing to that if it's not something that fits or you, rolls off of your tongue or explains what you do. So it's a really great way to start taking that imperfect action towards your messaging and your positioning strategy. And that messaging and positioning is usually where we start to feel anxious because it's like, oh, I have to explain what I do. I have to be distinctive. I have to be unique, and I have to stand out, and I have to be consistent, and I have to explain everything. And it's like it's through taking those smaller actions and getting that feedback. And sometimes that feedback's really positive, right? And you're like, oh, not they understood what I did and immediately knew somebody who was a good fit, and I was able to follow up with them with that referral. Like that is the kind of like, okay, like however I said at that time, I need to do it again that way. So that's why I always say, like, write down at least a draft so you can start to refine it in between and get better with it. But that's where I start, because if like I help people with their brand story, the first what's taking action in that way. Brand story is a very nebulous concept of, oh, I have to talk about all the things that have happened to me to get me to this point. And that's not necessarily true, right? In fact, it would probably not be very effective if it sounded like a hit list. A book is not like that. A book doesn't tell you, oh, they had breakfast that day, they walked to the bus stop. They only talk about the things that are going to be relevant later or relevant to the plot or reveal character. Like that is how a story works. So it's also that way with our marketing and with our message. What is relevant, what is going to stick out, like what is going to come up later, what is going to show like why this is important. And that's why like that is hard, because it's internal, it's about us. And obviously we have to think about our ideal clients and how they will receive that story. So we do both of this kind of push and pull of, how do I honor what happened to me and like what my business's mission is? And then how do I also honor like what they care about and what they want to know about me, and or what they want to know about what I do, in a way that they will want to get involved and they will feel like they understand and feel understood themselves. Because we want to be understood, but they really do want to be understood. And I feel like they're in this type of situation, the client is more important, to feel like they are clicking and connecting, because otherwise, we could just be wasting our breath with that. So that's why I've noticed from early on that is the piece that we need to, we need to start work. Like that's the first piece of action. And so think about it with your own work. What is, if you want to help your, audience start to take action, what is that first little bit of step? Because you can start getting them to take that smaller step. They will take the bigger step to want to work with you. Because they're seeing, because action is the antidote to anxiety. It really is. And I would even say, even in the global world, I used to be a community organizer before I had my kiddo. I'm interested in getting back into that space again, but it is so easy to feel hopeless and to feel anxious about everything that's happening right now and feel like it's out of your control. But once you start doing the work, in this context of like being an organizer, setting up appointments, meeting with elected officials, like, like finding out who else in your community is doing similar things. Like, how do you collaborate? How do you do more? When you start doing those things in the community, and then even in your own business, that's when it starts to feel, you don't feel hopeless. You see the path in front of you. And again, there's ways we could like know what we know now. I would change some things, but like, you're moving forward regardless. Again, the action in and of itself is not failing or succeeding. It is information that you need to go forward, to do better each time. And that's kind of where I want to leave it, because like that anxiety hits all of us, in different ways. I know a lot of folks who I know are perfectionists, or again, they're the planners and the never starters, or the starters and never finishers. That's me too. I'm not, there's no judgment with that. But from that, taking action, taking any little action, um, just promising yourself that you will show up once a week to like I'm doing right now. And again, this is not amazing. Like you can, like my glasses are showing a blur, they're the whatever. Like this is not the perfect way I would show up, but it is a way I am showing up. And so I think that's possible for all of us. So if you want to talk more about what actions will start to move you forward and have the most impact in your business, I do offer a narrative growth audit where I look through all of the stuff you've already created. I take a peek behind the scenes at your data and your analytics, and we really start to build out that roadmap of here is, like, I designed that minimum viable marketing campaign alongside you. Like, here is where you can get started. Here is a self-contained way to test drive this message, your story, and help you to feel more confident as you go out there and you start to show up, because you have just enough strategy to get you there, and just enough of the implementation like steps that you can start to see that progress and move forward in your business. So let me know via DM, or you can comment on the video and we can talk about it. All right. Thanks.